Okay, so picture this. You're living in like this quiet Idaho town, right? Life's pretty normal, you know. The kids are in school, neighbors chatting over the fence, families get together for barbecues, like just typical stuff.
Yeah.
And then two kids disappear. They're just gone.
Wow.
And it turns out the trail leads to their own mother and her new husband, this couple that's always whispering about, like doomsday prophecies.
Ew, wow.
And they're claiming to see dark spirits and stuff.
Well,
That's the kind of unsettling world we're stepping into today. It's the story of Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell.
yeah, what really gets me about this case is how it just like flips our whole idea of normal completely upside down.
Yeah.
I mean, on the surface, Lori and Chad were a pretty ordinary couple. They fit right into their community there in Rexburg. They had families, went to work, did their everyday things.
Right.
But underneath all that, something really disturbing was going on.
It's like that feeling when everything you thought you knew about your neighbors just crumbles. And that feeling gets even worse when you think about all the deaths tied to this couple. It's almost like dominoes falling one after the other.
Exactly. It all starts with the death of Lori's previous husband, Charles Vallow. He was shot by her brother, Alex Cox, in what they first thought was self-defense.
Yeah.
But then just a few weeks later, Chad's wife, Tammy Daybell, dies in her sleep. At the time, it seemed like just a really sad but natural thing.
Right.
But the timing, so close to those kids disappearing, it immediately set off alarm bells for the investigators.
Right. And then, as if that wasn't enough, Alex Cox, the same guy involved in Charles Vallow's death, he dies too.
Yeah.
Just a few months later, under some pretty mysterious circumstances. So now we've got 3 deaths, 2 missing kids, and right at the center of it all, Lori and Chad.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It's hard to believe this isn't like straight out of some dark thriller movie, right?
Mm-hmm. It really is. It's almost too much to take in. And that's where the timeline becomes super important. The kids, 7-year-old J.J. Vallow and 17-year-old Tylee Ryan vanished in September of 2019.
Right.
Tammy Daybell dies in October, and then Alex Cox in December of that same year. And all this time, Lori and Chad are just carrying on, even taking a trip to Hawaii while their kids are missing.
Yeah, that Hawaii trip, while the kids are still missing, it's just, I can't even wrap my head around it. And it wasn't a quick thing either.
Nope.
They were there for weeks, looking all carefree, while the whole world was searching for those kids. What did that tell us about them, do you think?
Well, it's a good question. On the one hand, it seems like they're totally detached, right? Like a sign of guilt, maybe.
Right.
Or just complete lack of empathy.
Yeah.
But some psychologists, they say it could also be them in denial, like a desperate attempt to act like everything's normal when their world is falling apart.
Yeah, I guess that's possible. Back in Rexburg, the authorities weren't buying it. They were carefully putting together a timeline. And that's when this one really creepy detail pops up.
Yeah.
Chad had sent Tammy, his wife, a text about burying a raccoon in his pet cemetery. And that text, which seemed harmless at first, becomes a crucial piece of evidence. Months later, they find the kid's remains buried in that exact same pet cemetery.
Oh, wow.
It's like he was predicting his own actions.
Yeah.
But it just adds this layer of premeditation to the whole horrible thing.
Chilling.
Totally.
Yeah.
Sends shivers down your spine.
Yeah.
And it shows how thorough the police were. They weren't just going with their gut feelings. They were following the evidence.
Yeah.
And that led them straight to Chad's backyard.
The search was massive. They brought in cadaver dogs, used ground-penetrating radar, even a backhoe.
Wow.
And in June of 2020, they made the awful discovery, the remains of JJ and Tylee. It confirmed what everyone had feared.
It's just heartbreaking. That discovery changed everything. It went from a missing persons case to a potential homicide investigation. And that's when the focus shifts to motive.
Yeah.
And in this case, the motive seems to be all tangled up with Lori and Chad's strange religious beliefs.
Absolutely. To understand what might have driven them, we got to dig into their fascination with doomsday prophecies, all that talk about zombies and evil spirits and this whole light and dark souls thing. It seems like that was a big part of how they saw the world.
So what exactly did they believe about these light and dark souls? Did they think they were the light souls? And if so, where did that leave the children?
That's exactly what we're going to explore next. And that's where this case takes an even darker turn. Get ready, because this is where things go from just confusing to truly disturbing.
Yeah, so we're left with this really creepy question, right?
Yeah.
How did these beliefs, these ideas about light and dark souls, actually lead to real-life actions?
It's a question that takes us right into this like super disturbing belief system.
From what we've been able to piece together, Lori and Chad, they believed that people could be like categorized as either light or dark based on their spiritual level. They even used a point system, ranking people based on how righteous they seemed.
Yeah, it's wild.
And that's where it gets really scary. They actually thought dark souls were basically zombies, like empty shells taken over by evil spirits. And according to their crazy logic, these zombies had to be like eliminated for some greater purpose, to like cleanse the world or bring about the apocalypse.
It's terrifying.
So they thought they were like some kind of divine cleaning crew. That's a messed up thought.
It really is. And there's evidence that points to them seeing themselves as light souls, chosen warriors fighting a spiritual war against darkness. In their minds, they might have actually believed they were doing the right thing, like even a merciful thing by freeing these souls from their zombie state.
It's hard to even grasp that kind of delusion.
I know, right?
But where did these beliefs even come from? Were they part of some established religion or something?
That's where Chad's background as an author comes in.
Okay.
He wrote all these doomsday-themed novels. It seems like he kind of cobbled this belief system together from different places, mixing parts of Mormonism with apocalyptic prophecies and these other esoteric ideas. It was like his own personal theology made up to fit his fantasies.
Wow. And Lori, with her, always searching for spiritual guidance and making dramatic statements, she seems to have been totally sucked in by his teachings.
Totally. It's a classic case of a charismatic person taking advantage of someone's weaknesses. Chad gave Lori a sense of purpose, a big story where she was the star.
Right.
He made her weirdness seem okay and fueled her need to feel spiritually important.
But this wasn't just some harmless spiritual journey. This belief system, as twisted as it was, seems to have directly led to their actions, maybe even the deaths of JJ and Tylee.
Exactly. If they truly thought the kids were dark or possessed, they might have seen their deaths as, like, a necessary evil, a twisted way to save them. Or maybe they saw the kids as obstacles, something standing in the way of their mission to bring about the apocalypse.
The idea of children as obstacles is just awful. It makes you wonder about the role of control and manipulation in all this.
For sure. Control seems to have been a huge factor. People who knew Lori said her behavior got more and more erratic and controlling, especially after meeting Chad. Their relationship became totally fixated on their shared beliefs, shutting out family and friends.
So, was Lori the one calling the shots? Was she manipulating Chad to do her dirty work? Or were they both equally consumed by this shared delusion?
It's tough to say. Lori definitely had manipulative tendencies in the past. But Chad, with his elaborate belief system, he provided the framework, the justification for their actions.
Right.
They seemed to feed off each other's fanaticism, which created this toxic spiral that spun out of control.
And in that spiral, 2 innocent kids lost their lives. It's a tragedy that exposes the dark side of religious extremism, the dangers of unchecked power, and the devastating consequences of blind faith.
Yeah, and it reminds us that even people who seem totally normal can do incredibly cruel things, especially when they believe something that justifies those actions. This case forces us to face that uncomfortable truth.
But amidst all this darkness, there's also the relentless work of law enforcement, the dedication of those who fought for justice for JJ and Tylee.
Absolutely. Investigators pieced together this incredibly complicated puzzle. They followed the evidence, which led them to the children's remains, and finally to Lori and Chad's arrest.
So where do things stand legally? What charges are they facing, and what could happen to them?
Yeah, it's a lot for the legal system to handle.
Right.
You've got the deaths of Tammy Daybell, Charles Vallow, and Alex Cox, all mixed up with the murders of JJ and Tylee. It's like a legal maze.
It really is. And the prosecutors, they've got a tough job ahead of them.
Yeah.
Right now, both Lori and Chad are looking at charges of conspiracy to destroy or conceal evidence.
Right.
They've pleaded not guilty, of course. But remember, to prove a conspiracy charge, you got to show there was a clear agreement.
And that they worked together to cover up a crime.
So even though they found that evidence on Chad's property, the kid's remains in the pet cemetery, that's pretty damning.
Right. Absolutely.
But connecting it directly to a conspiracy involving both Lori and Chad, that could be tricky.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. And then there's the murder charges. It seems obvious that JJ and Tylee were murdered, but to get a conviction, the prosecution has to prove who did it.
Right.
And show that it was premeditated. They need to tell a story that convinces the jury, without a doubt, that they're guilty.
So that's where the motive becomes so important.
Exactly.
The prosecution needs to explain why they did it. And in this case, their weird religious beliefs and all that talk about dark souls.
Yeah.
That could be the motive. But it also creates a whole new challenge for the legal team.
Oh, for sure. Bringing religion into a trial, it's risky. It could prejudice the jury.
Yeah,
And the defense will definitely argue that Lori and Chad's beliefs, no matter how crazy they sound,
right.
are protected under the First Amendment.
So the prosecution has to walk a fine line. They need to show those beliefs as a motive without making the jury uncomfortable
Yeah.
or turning the trial into a religious debate.
It's a tough balancing act. And we can't forget about the other deaths in this case either.
Right.
Tammy Daybell, Charles Vallow, Alex Cox. Investigating those deaths is like peeling back layers of an onion.
Yeah.
Every layer you peel, it just gets more complicated. And it's not clear if any of those deaths will lead to more charges against Lori and Chad.
It's a case with so many unanswered questions.
Yeah.
And it leaves everyone, the families, the investigators, even the people just following the case, feeling really uneasy.
Absolutely. The families of the victims are left with this incredible grief, trying to understand this tragedy that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
The people of Rexburg, they have to rebuild their sense of safety
Right.
and come to terms with the fact that something this dark could happen right in their community.
And for those of us watching this case, it makes us think about some uncomfortable things. About human nature, the power of belief, and how vulnerable our own communities are.
Definitely. It shows us that evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it's hidden in plain sight, looking
Yeah.
totally normal, disguised by religion.
It's a sobering thought. As we wait for the trial, the whole world is watching, hoping for justice for JJ and Tylee, for Tammy, and for everyone affected by this whole tragic mess. But even if they are found guilty,
Yeah.
the scars from this case, they'll last. They'll remind us of how powerful darkness can be and what can happen when people have blind faith.
It's a case that stays with you.
It really does.
It reminds us to be careful, to question anyone who says they have all the answers, and to appreciate every moment with the people we love, because life can change in a heartbeat.
It really can. And on that note, we'll leave you with this. In a world where we can't always be sure of things,
Right.
how do we learn to question things without becoming cynical?
Yeah, that's the question.
How do we keep an open mind while still thinking critically? These are things worth thinking about as we try to make sense of our complicated world.
Couldn't agree more.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.